Darklings. I'm back after kind of a long hiatus, talking about one of my favorite things, which is vampires. I can reliably talk about vampires for hours, and 90s vampires seem to be my favorite. So there are a lot of films in the 90s that came out that are about vampires, which is entirely relevant to my interests, and so I'm going to show some highlights. So out of the ones that I have seen, I have a good chunk of them on DVD. So the first one on this list is Interview with the Vampire from 1995, and this is an obvious one to include. My DVD copy looks super sketchy, so I didn't bring it over because I found it on eBay for $2. But if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's very pretty. If you're a fan of Anne Rice, definitely worth watching. I cannot quite recommend Queen of the Damned. Even though it's a terrible film, it's still a lot of fun, but I still won't put it on this list because it's from 2002. The next one is Blade. In this case, the first one in particular, although the second one is also quite good. I haven't seen the third and fourth ones. But Blade is a pretty big deal because it was one of the first big budget blockbuster Marvel films. And even though I don't care about Marvel over much, Blade is still an awesome character. And even if Wesley Snipes is a questionable actor, he still did a good job. The next one, and this is kind of a weird one, and it's in this awkward movie pack I got for $5, and it's Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat from 1990. So this one's kind of fun because Bruce Campbell is a very inept vampire hunter, and there is a town called Sundown, and all of the residents are vampires. It's very goofy, very campy, but I highly recommend watching it if you like that kind of thing. The next one on here, which is pretty divisive. Some people really like it and some people really don't. The first time I watched it, I thought it was stupid, but then I ended up liking it more and more on subsequent rewatches, which is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992 with Gary Oldman, Keanu Reeves, a bunch of other great actors. From Francis Ford Coppola. I definitely recommend watching this if you haven't seen it already. Next one, which I really like and not everybody does, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I quote this movie constantly. It's very cheesy, but I do think that Kristy Swanson is very funny and sweet as the title role. Next one, which is an underrated John Landis gem, is Innocent Blood from 1992. This is kind of like the beautiful femme fatale kind of vampire girl, and then there's also a mob hit in, I believe, Pittsburgh. So this one's kind of darkly funny, has a lot of cameos, which is one of the reasons I love John Landis, including such cameos as Frank Oz, Dario Argento, and David Cronenberg. So this is certainly a fun one. It's not perfect, but it is definitely in need of more viewing. Now this one is not exactly a vampire film. The Reflecting Skin from 1990 is kind of an art house film, and the vampire is more suggested than real, which isn't really a spoiler. It's kind of about like the really weird childhood daydreams taking a type of reality. So this is in very, very strange middle America. There's a lot of wheat. I've never seen wheat look quite so pretty on film as in this. Very weird, kind of fucked up, but definitely worth watching. Next one, which I don't have a copy of because it really wasn't very good despite being directed by Wes Craven, is The Vampire in Brooklyn. So this is kind of a hit or miss one. Again, vampires and like crime bosses. I don't know why that was a thing in the 90s. So that one's from 1995 with Eddie Murphy and Angela Bassett. Angela Bassett looks great. And it's kind of goofy, but also kind of fun. So might be your taste, might not. Next one, Guillermo del Toro's first feature film, Cronos. This is a very unique vampire myth. I love this film. It's not for everybody, but it is really interesting, very different. Definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. It is primarily in Spanish, which I know is kind of a roadblock for some people, but watch it anyway. The next one, which is not for everybody, but I love it, even though it's a hot mess, is Children of the Night from 1990 with cult actress Karen Black in one of the title roles. So this has a really weird take on vampirism, which is like the children will eat blood and then the parent will feed off of the child kind of vampires. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in here, but it's definitely different and worth watching. So this one, From Dusk Till Dawn, from one of my favorites, Robert Rodriguez, who I did do a director spotlight on. I haven't seen any of the sequels, but the first one is just a bloody good time. It is explosive and ridiculous, darkly funny, and totally worth it. It's definitely a cult favorite. This one is definitely not for everyone. It is horrible. but I also think it's really funny, even though it's really stupid, which is Dracula Dead and loving it. But I'm also a really biased Mel Brooks fan, so I get a kick out of this one. It's definitely kind of ridiculous, but it has some charming moments in it. But again, not for everybody. Another one not for everybody is the Subspecies film series. There are 5 of these movies. Subspecies, Subspecies 2, Bloodstone, Subspecies 3, Bloodlust, Subspecies 4, Bloodstorm, and the Vampire Journals, which is only sort of connected. Full Moon Features, I could do an entire video on, since they are super hit or miss, low budget, weird, culty type of company, but I can totally rewatch these again and again and again, because even though they're stupid, I still find them entertaining, even the 4th one, which is the least impressive of the lot. The next one on here is Vampires from John Carpenter from 1998. I probably would have liked this one a little bit better if I had any fondness for James Woods, and I don't really like him very much, so it's kind of hit or miss for me. But Sheryl Lee of Twin Peaks fame is still a very impressive character to throw in there. It's kind of a weird vampire western, which is a very niche type of thing, but also goes with Sundown and From Dusk Till Dawn. So that one it's worth checking out. I don't know if the sequel is, because I haven't seen it. But the next one, which I just found on Shudder recently and I've been looking for a couple of years, is Blood and Donuts from 1995. This little Toronto indie gem is kind of goofy and has the same type of campy, Byronic hero, tragic vampire that I like. And the low budget's a little bit frustrating, but it's still just art house enough to be captivating. But again, not for everybody. The one after that, which I really don't care for over much, but is kind of interesting and different, is Sleepwalkers from 1992. There's a lot of stuff that's super rushed and weird in it, but it's also kind of a cool idea, so it's worth checking out, but don't expect very much from it. And then the next one, which is a total guilty pleasure film that I wish was on DVD but isn't, and is kind of a pain in the ass to find, is Love Bites from 1993 with Adam Ant. It's a hot mess, but it's so funny in its cheesy, goofy little way, and I had to hunt for it for quite a while in order to find it. Again, I really wish I had that on DVD, or even that it existed on DVD at all, which it doesn't. Next one, which I just recently watched through Amazon Prime, is Tale of the Vampire with Julian Sands. Now, if you're a big horror movie fan, Julian Sands is definitely kind of a culty actor known for stuff such as Boxing Helena and Warlock. So he has kind of a fey, ethereal, like timeless quality to him. So for him to play a vampire and play like an immortal character is pretty believable in its own way. It's, again, got that Byronic hero, tragic backstory kind of angle, but he definitely owns it pretty well, even though it looks too much like a student film for it to be truly good. The next one, which is a TV film, and I have in this super questionable multi-box set thing, it's the only one on this worth watching, which is Daughter of Darkness, a TV movie from 1990 with Mia Sara and Anthony Perkins. So this is kind of cheesy, but also was one of the first films filmed in Romania, and it's definitely worth checking out, but you do have to keep in mind it is a TV movie, and it kind of has TV movie scripting, so it's a bit of a mess, but also kind of entertaining. She goes to Romania in order to find her father, and then just realizes that he's a vampire, so it's definitely a mess. And then the last one I have on this list is Bordello of Blood from 1996, which is a Tales of the Crypt film. This is not a good movie. Don't go into this expecting a good movie. It's brought to you by Tales from the Crypt, so you know it's kind of comic booky, cheesy, and ridiculous, and really just kind of out there in too many ways. But there's lots of bloodshed and sexual content, which I know is kind of a big deal for some people. So if you like that kind of thing and you want to investigate a hot mess, you can look into that. A couple more movies which I haven't seen but figured were worth mentioning were Nadja, Pale Blood, Karmina, and Embrace of the Vampire, which I know is only a big deal if you like Alyssa Milano, but is not apparently a good movie. But while I'm already on the topic, a couple of vampire TV shows to mention would be a recent discovery for me that I just marathoned a few months ago, which is Forever Night, which includes a vampire who is also a Toronto detective. First season is the best out of the 3, but it is laughably ridiculous and super melodramatic in the kind of the way of almost like a pulp novel. It's pretty entertaining, even though it is not a high quality show. It still ran for 3 seasons somehow, and I cannot be sorry for that. Has a soft spot in my heart, definitely worth checking out. And one of my all-time favorite shows, started in 1997, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I like the film and the show. I've seen the show 5 times through a piece, which is probably too many times, but I can't be sorry about it. And then the last one, which I haven't seen but has been recommended to me numerous times, is Kindred the Embrace. I haven't decided whether or not it's worth investigating for me based off of what the plot is. But the 90s vampire aesthetic is very influential in the goth scene, if you're partial to that, because I know not all of my viewers are goth. But there is a certain charm to the 90s that the vampire film has. Part of it is the Byronic hero, and I know I keep tossing around that term, and some people might not be familiar with it, but it means a very tragic, sort of dashing and soulful type of hero that is popularized by Lord Byron and his whole persona. So basically a hot mess, but well worth it in its own way. I like the tragic immortal. It's kind of entertaining to me even when it borders into the cheesy, but I also like cheesy, even though I know that camp is not for everybody. Anyway, I hope that you are familiar with at least a handful of these and considers at least some of them worth checking out if you haven't seen them already. And until next time, Darklings.